So you've got a boat. That's great. Now, what paperwork exactly do you need to have to make that legal? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Today I'm talking about the difference between documentation and registration and titling and when you might choose one or the other. Or maybe it's that you need both. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by MantisMarine.com, maker of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Calypso has the M2. We call it our portable mooring. The thing is amazing. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, and a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting. Visit MantisMarine.com and see for yourself. Let's face it, paperwork can be confusing even in the best of times. But as you read through the forums and listen to people, you'll hear terms like documentation and registration used interchangeably. And the thing is, they're not interchangeable. This podcast is specifically geared towards American boaters. So you've gotten a boat and you want to make it legal. What do? The first thing you need to do is you need to title it. And as an American, you have two options. You can either document it or you can state title it. Those are the two ways that you title your boat. Documentation is titling your boat through the United States Coast Guard. It's limited to vessels 100% owned by U.S. citizens. If you have a partner who's not an American and you share the boat 50-50, then you actually can't be Coast Guard documented. So just know that as a caveat. In order to be documented, your boat needs to be 5 tons or greater. So if you have a very small, very light boat, you won't be able to document your boat. There is a cost, and the cost for documentation, which again is titling your boat through the U.S. Coast Guard, and the cost of that is $26 a year. There's an extra fee if the boat's being documented for the very first time, if you are the new owner of the boat, or if you've let your documentation lapse and you're trying to renew it, but after some time has gone by. As of January 2022, you will only be able to get a documentation for a 5-year time span, which can be a little frustrating if you aren't planning on keeping your boat that long. So again, that might be a reason why you wouldn't choose documentation. All of the details are at the official website, and the link for that is in the show notes. And an important thing to know is that if you are renewing a documented vessel, if you're renewing the documentation on it, you're going to get all kinds of official-looking mail from sites that charge outrageous amounts to renew. It's not hard to fill out the paperwork yourself. You are looking for the uscg.mil site. It is a national vessel documentation site, but it is a .mil at the end of it. Don't fall for the mail that you may get, and it will look incredibly official. It will look stamped, and it will look like it came from a U.S. government agency. It didn't. I am 99% sure that I can promise you it didn't, particularly if they're offering to have you renew your documentation for something like $80 or $150 a year. It doesn't cost that much. So why would you want to document your vessel? Well, it's really, really official. There are some countries, if you're planning on cruising outside of the United States, there are supposedly some countries that require federal documentation for entry, as it's proof of both ownership and origin of the boat. The cons for U.S. Coast Guard documentation, and people will say that it's registration. It's not. It's documentation. The cons for documentation are that the paperwork can take some time to receive. As of August 2021, it was taking them at least 2 months to process the initial paperwork. It's likely to be more expensive than state title costs because it's an annual fee, even though they're only doing it in 5-year chunks as of January 2022. And it does need to be renewed, so it's just something else to keep track of. So you would want to make sure that you have a way of keeping track of that. The other way that you can title your vessel is with a state title. And if you don't want the federal documentation, if you're not a U.S. citizen, or if your boat is less than 5 tons in weight, you will have to, or you will need to go the state title route. And I can't tell you how much of that's going to cost because the costs vary by state. So if you want to check your state's website, and as a hint, it's usually through the Department of Parks and Wildlife or Wildlife Resources. Sometimes it's even the Motor Vehicle Department. So just check on your state. You might want to Google whatever state you're looking for and titling a boat. Just be aware, some states will require that you physically bring the boat to the agency. Well, that can be really challenging if your boat is not road legal or it's too large for that. So just think about that too. Sometimes that agency is located really far inland. I think that they do this because they want to make sure you're not titling a non-existent boat, or somehow, I'm not sure why you would want to give them money if you didn't have a boat, but there's probably some reason for it. But it also might make you understand that they're very used to dealing with far smaller boats, jet skis and small dinghies, anything with a motor. The pro with a state title is that it's generally fast. You should be able to get it within a couple of weeks. It can be easy depending on if you have to take the boat to a physical location or not. And the other pro with a state title is that you just pay once. You're paying for the title, you have it, you've got it, it's in your hot little hands, and there's no annual fee. And a con with a state title is that it may not be as recognized when you're checking into a foreign country. Just something to be aware of. In addition to the title, then you're dealing with registration. And registration is completely separate from the title business. Like a state title, registration varies state by state. And that even comes down to whether you're required to be registered or not. That changes by a state. Some states, if the boat is documented, if you've gotten your title for the boat from the federal government, they don't require that you also be registered. Virginia is one of these. So when we changed from Calypso being titled by the state to being titled by the government, we were given the option of renewing our registration or not. We didn't have to. Some states require that you be registered even if you are documented. Other states don't really care what the documentation status is at all. They don't really care where you got your title from. They don't even care if you're a resident of the state at all. If your boat spends more than a certain amount of time in those state waters, they will be really happy to require you to register it there. Other states, Florida and Maryland are ones that I know specifically, they require that you register your boat somewhere. Meaning, even if you have a documented vessel, they want your boat to be registered somewhere to be able to play in their waters. And if they find that your boat is not registered somewhere else, they will be really happy to direct you to the local place to get their state registration. There aren't any pros and cons really to registration. You either have to have it or you don't. And that really can depend on where you live and where you want to cruise. So really the basics on paperwork, despite all the conversation around documentation and registration and what do I have to have and where do I go, all boats will have to have at least one piece of paperwork. You will have to have a title. That title can either be from the state or it can be from the federal government. Most boats will have two pieces of paperwork, that title and a state registration. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when we're out there with all of our paperwork completed, and then we don't even have to talk about it anymore. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love it when we hear from our listeners. Our emails are in the show notes. We also really love it when you tell your friends about us. And we love it, of course, if you leave us a 5-star review, because it does help other people to find us and find the information that we really hope you find helpful and useful. Have the most spectacular week.
Slow down.